Welcome to the Andy Social Podcast. My name is Andy, and a big hello to people that are listening for the first time. I hope you enjoy this episode, and as a result, go back and listen to some of the previous episodes of the Andy Social Podcast. I'll get into this week's guest in a moment, but also a big welcome back and thank you to everybody that's been listening over the last couple of years. I don't know what episode this is going to be now. I assume maybe 79 or 80, possibly, maybe. But thank you, and I hope this is going to be another episode that you enjoy, and just thank you very much for all the support that you've been providing me by listening to these episodes each week. It means a hell of a lot. All right. I'm trying to refine these intros as best as I can because I tend to go off on tangents and ramble. So this week's episode is with a gentleman by the name of John Shearer. Now, John Shearer is a mindfulness coach, and I've been aware of John for a few years now. For those that have been listening to this podcast, I'm going to take a stab in the dark here, maybe episode 25 or 26 with Dr. Craig Hassed, who is a professor and teaches the practice of mindfulness. And that was a really good episode, and I got a lot out of that. And around that time and since then, I've been quite fascinated and interested in the practice of being mindful. And I like to think that I'm reasonably mindful in certain situations, but like everybody, I definitely need to improve. And there's certainly times each and every day where I'm not being mindful and I'm sitting in autopilot mode and just, crawling through life, not knowing what on earth is going on. So it was great to chat with John. I was actually quite surprised because I sent John an email a couple of hours ago and just gave him the spiel of who I was and what the podcast is all about to see if he was interested in having a chat. And literally within 2 minutes, he replied back and said, call me anytime. So this is the conversation with John. So I was really, really happy with the conversation that we had. I'm going to put everything that we talk about in the show notes over at andysocial.net. Also, everything that we speak about is over at John's website, which is mindfulnesscoach.com.au. You can also search for him on Facebook. I will touch on this a little bit more in the outro of this episode, but the best way to find everything, as always, with all my other previous guests as well, is andysocial.net. And if you had more questions and want to learn a lot more about being mindful in general or learning a lot more about mindfulness practices, you can definitely go to my website or to mindfulnesscoach.com.au and reach out to John. And I'm sure John would be more than happy to talk to you further and hopefully lead you in a direction to learn more about this amazing skill that is so simple and feels so silly to talk about at times, but it's often very hard for people to really get a good understanding and grasp on. So anyway, we talk about that in this episode. So that's it. Enough talking from me. Please enjoy this episode with John Shearer.
G'day, Andy.
Hi, John. How are you?
Lucky guess, eh?
Oh, who knows? You could have been getting a lot of phone calls.
Well, I have been today because it's my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday. Wow.
Thanks.
Fantastic. There you go. What is it? The 20th of May?
20th of May, my 65th.
65th. Well, happy birthday.
It's got a good ring to it, 65.
That's it. It's sort of halfway in that decade.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Excellent.
Well, I won't take up a lot of your time, but I thought I'd have a chat to you about, this big topic that you seem to be immersed in, being mindfulness.
Oh, more than immersed in. I live it, I teach it, it's my life.
Well,
it's making a lot of difference to a lot of people, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of questions. I think just to get the ball rolling and set the scene a little bit, do you want to explain a little bit about yourself? And I've read a bit of your story as well online. It's quite interesting. Do you want to touch on a bit of that?
Yeah, I just put some stamps on a book. So it'll probably take about a week to get to you. I'll mail it today.
Yeah, sure.
It's only 12,000 words in my book. But how the book came about, in 2014, I created a Facebook event and I called it Mindfulness Day. because in Australia we have a day for everything else. I thought, well, why not mindfulness? So I made it the first Sunday in May, and Mindfulness Day launched what was to become Mindful May. And what I did all through May, I got up at dawn because I went to the universe for 30 words. That was the first thing I did, because I'd been studying mindfulness for 5 years up to that time.
Right.
Pretty full on too. So I got 30 words, and then I wrote a blog every morning. And then I invited Australians with mental suffering to the event, and 4,700 people turned up.
Wow.
It was amazing. And it was an interactive Facebook type event, private messages and emails and all sorts of things. And at the end of it, hundreds of lives were transformed. It was just amazing. So I said that I'd turn the event into a book. So that's what my book is. It's my introduction and 30 blogs. It's quite a small book.
Is this the Mindful Actions book?
Yeah, Mindful Actions.
Yeah, great.
And so all through it, there's actions to take in developing a mindful practice. And yeah, like I said, it's made a huge impact. It's been amazing.
How did you? What was the turning point that led you to mindfulness in the first place?
The turning point really was in 2009. I lost a friend to an asthma attack, and at that time, my wife and I were running a pool hall in the main street of Wagga Wagga. 16 pool tables and a jukebox and a lot of youth, as you can imagine. And my wife has asthma, the same as my friend did, and she was using a nebulizer to get a day going, especially in winter, just the same as he was. So then I thought, well, wow, I think we need to change the climate, get her out of that asthma sort of thing. So we moved up here to Grafton. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I am a trained counsellor. So I started surfing the internet to find out what the latest therapies were, what the latest things in mental health were worldwide. And I surfed and surfed and surfed. And what I found was a book called The Happiness Trap. Are you familiar with that book, Andy?
I've heard of the book. I've got it on my list to read, but I haven't read it yet.
Okay. Well, The Happiness Trap was written by an Australian doctor, Dr. Russ Harris. And he is the one who really brought ACT to Australia. And the book is about ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's very much a mindfulness-based therapy. So I bought the book and fell in love with mindfulness. Wow. And started practicing myself. And, you know, it's sort of gone from there. But where my passion comes from was in 1982, and you might have already checked out my website and stuff, I died in a truck accident down near Kilmore in Victoria. And that's where I ended up, in Kilmore Hospital. Terrible name for a town, isn't it?
Not the best choice of words.
Yeah.
But did you say you died? You actually died?
Yeah, they revived me at the scene. Wow. And then I regained consciousness, I don't know how much later. There was no bright lights or anything you sometimes read about.
Yeah.
It was just black. It was nothing. But coming back, what an experience that was. Amazing. Whew. You know, I still can't find words to even describe it. Just so slow, so calm, so, you know, amazing. Anyhow. But I was pretty smashed up. My dog died. The bonnet of the truck rolled up and came through the windscreen and finished where I was sitting. And you wouldn't believe I was alive if you saw the photos of the wreck, which I did. But first thing that really happened was I felt there was a reason why I was alive, you know. I didn't know what the reason was. Anyhow, I had operations and everything else. I had a lot of physical injuries. But the lasting thing I had was 15 years of depression. And I was on all sorts of medications. I was diagnosed with mental illness, and by 1997, 15 years later, I was rock bottom. They'd written me off, basically. Professional health people told me what I had was incurable. I'd have to take medication for the rest of my life, and I'd never work again.
Did they say that you had something like PTSD or something along those lines?
Bipolar, or it was called manic depression back then.
Right, okay.
What the diagnosis was.
Yep.
And interesting enough, a lot of people with the same diagnosis turned up for my event too, and they get attracted to me because, you know, I show them a different way of handling it with mindfulness rather than medication. And it works great. So, you know, that's how it was. So I was rock bottom, and an old friend I hadn't seen for nearly 20 years before my accident, and he left Wagga Wagga, and he was passing through town, and he had what he called a spiritual prompt to come and knock on my door and catch up, of course, and tell me his story, which he did. And I haven't been able to find him, and he kept going. He left town, and I've tried to find him, you know, from time to time. I would try again. Can't. He sort of disappeared. He has no idea what he did for me that day. And the day was 10th of October, which was to become World Mental Health Day, just coincidentally. And amazing. So that was way back in 97. And anyhow, I got my life back. My depression ended. I got off meds, and I worked again, and, you know, went into business, and I haven't looked back. And so I had my awakening at that time.
Sorry, just very quickly, what kind of things did he tell you on that day when he stopped by?
Well, he really told me his story, and his story was that he left Wagga Wagga and he moved to Sydney to be a professional punter.
Right.
And he followed the trot scene. And he went and visited trainers and you know, like trot people, anyhow, trot trainers and owners and what have you, and really got into the scene. And he did quite well. And he built a big home, got himself a family, but then gambling and drugs got him. And down he went. He lost everything. He went rock bottom. And then he had a spiritual awakening with a religion, actually. And it's really not about that anyhow. But, you know, so he shared that with me. And the awakening moment for me was I realised that it's like Pink Floyd, you know, the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
There is a dark side.
Yeah.
And there is a light. And that simple thing was enough to remove my blinkers, really. And I had studied world histories, cultures, religions, you name it, because I wanted to know the reason why I was alive. And so I was hungry for knowledge. And, you know, that was it in the end. That's what did it. Just the realisation that there is a dark and a light, you know, very simple thing. So then in my mind, whatever thoughts were coming along, I could deal with them because I realised, well, no, that's from the dark side, you know, may the 4th be with you. That was my mindfulness day in 2014, was 4th of May.
Love it.
You've probably heard that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that must have been, that date back in 1997 must have been one of the first times that you actually, probably not deliberately, but were mindful at that point in time. You're in the moment, taking in his story, and that was that sort of one of those turning points. Yeah.
Yeah, but really, I've been mindful for a lot longer than that too. Now, like looking back, because take 2007, that was the last year I was coaching kids to play pool, teaching kids to play pool.
Sure.
And I used to use the caveman theory. It's a bit of a theory I made up. And if you can imagine the caveman coming out of his cave in the morning and having a stretch, what are you going to do today? Well, the caveman, he needed to be very aware. And, you know, if there was rustling in the trees or anything, he needed to be aware because he could get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. You know, it was dangerous back then. and that's how we as humans have been conditioned. And we still think that way. What could go wrong?
Yep.
You know, what is wrong? What's wrong with the world? What's wrong with people? You know, that's how we are. But it's not the way to go. But I use the caveman theory in shooting pool because obviously all he had to do was go hunting. So he had his spear, and when he throws his spear, what is he thinking about? Is he thinking about how to throw the spear? Or is he thinking about the consequences if he misses? You know? No. He takes everything using his awareness only and an empty mind. He uses his awareness, wind, and all the factors and throws his spear. It's the same shooting pool. So I taught my boys, and 4 of my boys from Wagga Wagga actually filled the semi-finals of the Australian Championship that year, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And kids from Sydney and Melbourne, where they could all pot balls, they were good pool players. But my boys, you know, they knew how to think or not think. Yeah, which is pretty amazing.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely...
So that's mindfulness.
It has so many benefits, doesn't it? When you think about it, I mean, it's such a versatile practice.
Is it ever?
Yeah.
And it's actually a very simple thing too.
Well, do you want to explain briefly what mindfulness is for somebody that probably hasn't been exposed to it as of yet?
Well, if you haven't, read my book, and then we'll have a discussion. That might be the way to go.
Yeah, okay.
But mindfulness is a very simple thing. And what it is, it's the practice, and that's a key word here, the practice of bringing your mind back to the present moment over and over again until it becomes second nature. And particularly when you notice unhelpful or negative thoughts, okay, when you notice that, it's all part of your awareness, then what I teach is to become your silent observer. And the silent observer is what I call our sixth sense, or there's other names for it like gut feeling, intuition, soul, spirit. There's lots of different names you can give the silent observer. But if you become the silent observer and pause your mind and connect with where you are, who you're with, and also connect to your source energy, because we all recognize that there is a source, you know, it's there. And once you start connecting with it, wow, you know, it's life-changing. It's quite amazing, but it needs to be practiced.
And it's, I mean, probably a big thing of that is just that acceptance of whatever feelings you have at that point in time in that moment, where I think a lot of people, if they're, so for instance, they're frustrated or upset, they're always trying to resist those feelings. And if anything, it makes the matter worse. But if you have a level of acceptance to understand this is how I'm feeling in this moment, and then you can work towards moving away from it, but it's more of that initial acceptance in that period of time, I assume.
That's another key word, acceptance. And it's no accident that ACT, you know, that stands for acceptance and commitment therapy. So it's exactly what you're just saying. You accept what's going on in the moment, accept where we are at any time, right now, no matter what condition we're in, accept it. Because we really can't move forward until we do. But you're right, if thoughts are just that, thoughts, you know, there's no real need to dwell on them or fight with them or act on them or try and avoid them with alcohol and drugs. They're just thoughts. So the idea is, because once we do start dwelling on them or arguing with them or fighting with them, they can turn into real monsters, you know. But by accepting them, making room for them and noticing them, there's that story, I'm not good enough, or, you know, whatever it is, a story that comes back, you know, maybe from some trauma in your past. So once you recognise that it's there, say, and it shows up, there it is, well, don't make any big deal of it. Play mind games, and there's some mind games you can play, or focus to your values. And that's what acceptance and commitment therapy teaches you to do. Focus on your values, different to goals. Yeah.
Do you want to explain that a bit more? Like, what do you mean by values?
Well, values is what we stand for, what's important to us, and how we want to be remembered when we're gone. And I did a simple exercise many years ago, working out what values are, and that was to imagine yourself at your own funeral. So there you are, laying in a coffin, and then what you do, you imagine your loved ones, and there they are, just standing, and then you imagine what you would like your loved ones to be saying. And you can try that later, what you would like them to be saying, you know. And when I did it, I could see my kids, I've got 4 kids, and they were saying, Dad always had time for us. So that becomes a value.
Yeah.
So then you make an action plan based on that value. And you can live your life like that. You know, plan your life based on your values, not what you can get out of it.
And there's probably a lot of people that don't even know what their values are.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there you go.
Do you think that, I mean, mindfulness has always been important for as long as we've known, but do you think it's even more important now with the amount of technology and data and distraction that we all have on a day-to-day basis? There's always things trying to get our attention all the time, whether it be our phones and advertising and TV and, you know, everything and anything out there. Do you think that mindfulness is probably even more crucial now for people than it ever has been before?
Absolutely. And you've only got to look at the figures. Here in Clarence Valley, for example, we are number one in Australia. This is nothing to be proud of, for youth suicide. Come on, you know. And it's everywhere. Suicide, depression, and all sorts of things. And you're right. The world we live in now is focused on having and getting instead of being and giving. And it's fast. And like you said, there's so many things. And the opposite of mindfulness is mindlessness. And mindlessness is being distracted. Your thoughts being elsewhere other than where you are. And honestly, when we live just going through the motions, life passes us by. You know, you miss all the little things. And often little things can be very big things. So if you're in the moment, and you can practice this any time, in a traffic jam, you know, down in the Gong, or in a supermarket queue, you know, rather than being impatient, be mindful, pause, and connect with where you are. You never know. Sometimes you might overhear a conversation. Oh, what did you just say? And that can lead to something major.
Yeah.
You know, it can be a simple thing. Or someone saying, oh, you really should go and talk to such and such. Well, go and talk to them, because there could be a reason. That's like a lead from the universe, you know, all those sorts of things. But if going through the motions, fast-paced, doing what you're doing, getting up and doing the same thing every day mindlessly, well, you miss all that. You really do. And quite often you totally miss what your purpose is. And that's really what we need to be doing, living with purpose.
It's so easy for people to be mindlessness, like to have that mindlessness where they're in autopilot every day and just doing the same thing over and over again without thinking. It's almost, I think for a lot of people, it's too easy to fall into that. And to be mindful, at least initially, is quite difficult, because I think for a lot of people, it feels like you're fighting your own distracted mind. And so there's a lot of initial, I guess, well, training and practice and doing it over and over again to try and get better and better.
Exactly. And that's why I teach people to be the silent observer, be that part of us which is energy when you get right down to it. And it's not an easy thing. Like you said, it's not an easy thing. But with practice, you know, you get better and better at it. And by being mindful, and that's the other thing I teach always, and this is my thing, be mindful, pause, and connect. Be mindful, pause, and connect. Use be mindful as a key thought, or you can use stop, if you like. When you notice your mind elsewhere, miles away, whatever, then say stop. Or be mindful. Use it as a key. Be mindful, which switches you into pause mode. And you pause your mind and you turn on all your five senses. Hearing, your sight, everything. Where you are. You connect with where you are. You also connect with who you are. Because the greatest gift you can give your loved ones is your presence.
Absolutely.
It's a simple thing. And when people are present with us, we sense it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone's said to you, Andy, have you been listening to me?
All the time.
Yeah, well, how it is.
Yeah.
And connect. And that's the important part,
Yeah.
But the power, and I say this a lot now, the power of mindfulness is in the silence between our thoughts. So the more silence we can create, then the more power to us. Because it's like in religions, and religious people pray. But the power is in silence. You know, we've got to stop and listen. You know, listen beyond our thoughts.
Yeah.
Just listen. It's amazing what comes to us. It's amazing how our lives prioritize themselves. The next step comes, often little steps, but it comes out of the silence.
We often don't stop at all. We hardly ever stop. We're usually always moving, always thinking about the next thing. I've always struggled over the years with always thinking of the next thing that's coming along. And then when I get to that thing, I'm not even enjoying that moment where I've achieved it. I'm already thinking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And you find that after a while, you'll never be satisfied. You'll never satisfy yourself because you're always thinking in the future. You're not thinking in the moment.
Excellent. You've got it. You've got a good handle on it, Andy.
I'm getting
That's
there.
why I say, like, the world is focused on having and getting.
Yeah.
And when you get it, then there's something else to get. And so you're never satisfied. You're right. Yeah. But if we can be grateful, and that's a huge word, gratitude. If we can be grateful in the moment where we are now, what we have now, then that actually opens doors to more. You know, we don't have to chase it; it's there.
What do you think? When you're talking about grateful, I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to do. What can somebody do to be better at being grateful? I mean, obviously, it all links back into being mindful, of course. But is there something that you've felt has worked for you personally to really sort of feel that grateful feeling?
Every day, just when you go to bed, just think of something that you're grateful for today, something that happened, and then when you first get up in the morning, think of something else. You know, and that way you build up a bit of a repertoire, if you like, of positive things in your mind. What you're actually doing is training your mind in a way, and that's what mindfulness does as well. It trains your mind, because once we control our minds rather than our minds controlling us, wow, that's all power to us.
And it's probably that incremental, as you said, just like one thing when you go to bed and one thing in the morning. It doesn't have to be this barrage of as many different things as you can possibly think of. It's just gently giving you little things to build upon, as you said, like training your mind to be thinking with a more positive perspective.
Exactly. And when those negative things do come along, and then you switch to your values, because you still need somewhere for your mind to go, because our minds are there to produce thoughts. That's the job of our mind, and that's what they do, even if people are meditating. And I should just mention that mindfulness and meditation are separate. One can lead to the other, and they're certainly connected, but meditation is a relaxation thing that people make time for, whereas mindfulness is a way of living your life.
Mindfulness is constant, isn't it?
It's a constant all day long. We can be mindful, especially when there's a lot going on. Wow.
Yeah.
If there's something in your face, like you're in a band and you get people antagonizing you, you probably get it. Well, when people do that, or they're angry at you or whatever, when you realize that how they're carrying on is where they're coming from, when you realize that, that's pretty powerful too. And then when it's happening, we can think, be mindful and pause and just go to that place, connect. We can stay peaceful. It doesn't really matter what's going on in our outer world. We can still be peaceful inside. It's a choice.
It's that old cliche, think before you speak. There's so many cliches that you sort of don't think about too much, but then over time they tend to make sense the more and more they pop up. But it's definitely something that if you're present and you're in the moment, and then you suddenly are in tune with your senses, that you can then carefully and probably more purposefully make a decision as to how you physically react or verbally react, whether you move away from a situation or whether you are being very intentful of the message that you pass on in response or whatever it might be. But it's definitely that think before you
You've got
speak.
it.
Yeah.
In fact, you don't react at all. You respond.
Respond.
And that's a difference right there, you know. React, not good. Respond, yes. But that's why we need that little pause, you know. Or like Grandma used to say, count to 10, you know, if you feel yourself getting angry.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, you know. Because even if anger is welling up in you, when we all get angry, you know what it feels like when it happens.
Yep.
You know, you feel it. It wells up. But then you can just cut it off. Go, be mindful and pause. Notice the anger. You've got to notice the anger. Notice whatever emotion it is. Notice it. And then you always have a choice what you do with it. You know? Yeah.
When you were just mentioning before the difference between meditation and mindfulness, would you say that meditation would help you strengthen your mindfulness? So for some people
absolutely.
that don't, maybe should try some meditation to help them get better at being mindful?
Certainly, but people who are in a bad place find it very difficult to meditate. I know, I could never do it. I can now.
Yeah.
I could never do it because my mind was just too busy. You know, you sit down cross-legged and, you know, like, no. You know, it don't last a minute.
Yeah.
No, don't want to do this. Off you go and do something else. So, but meditation, you're right, certainly involves mindfulness because you're pausing and your thoughts are still flowing. You know, you can't just sit there for 20 minutes with an empty mind. No one can, you know. And some people think that's what meditation is. No, what it is being mindful, and being mindful involves just observing your thoughts as a silent observer. Just when you learn to step back or sit down cross-legged and observe your thoughts rather than getting all caught up in them. Let them flow, you know, just let them flow. It's like children, how they play.
Oh, yeah.
And they go from one thing to the next. They're creative, they're curious, they're adventurous, and they flow. They live in flow. They go from one thing to the next, and their life just flows. And somehow life happens and we lose that, you know. We really need to get back to it.
Yeah, tap back into that childlike approach.
Yeah.
I read online that you work with juvenile justice as a youth mentor. Do you still do that?
Well, up there for 8 years, up until the end of January this year, and I retired from that.
So
and what I am going to do after I get back from my cruise next week, because I'm having like a retirement cruise, if you like, and also my birthday. So
nice.
Me and my sister and her husband and my wife, we're going on a cruise around the week, Sundays out of Brisbane for 4 nights next week.
Nice.
Which will be good.
Yeah.
And when I get back, I'm going to launch a mentoring service. And how it's going to work is I'm going to offer my service. It's going to cost $12 a fortnight for people. And what they'll be able to do, because I'm working on another book called Mindful Insights, and people will be able to subscribe to my mentoring service. It goes for 12 months, and they go from wherever they are now, and I'm really going to try and target people with that have been diagnosed with something and take them on that 12-month journey, and at the end of it, they'll have a certificate to be a mindfulness mentor. Or people, I'm doing that now, training people to be mindfulness mentors, because that's what the world needs. It needs an army of mentors who can teach people to be mindful, and especially children in our schools, because I've been lobbying government about that. And it is starting. There's a little bit of light, you know, on the horizon for that to happen, and it can't be soon enough.
It's something that would have been the same as you as far as the schooling system's been more or less the same for about 100 years or so. But the teaching and education has always been around memorizing facts and information and then spitting it back out in a test format. And a lot of it, that whole emotional intelligence, learning how to deal with situations, learning how to respond rather than react, and accepting certain circumstances and whatnot, that was never covered in school. And
No.
I was very fascinated when I read about that, because I think you had mindful educators.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, and Mindfully Mad as well, where you're looking to add or push for mindfulness in schools. And I thought that's just it's a long time coming. It should have been done a long time ago, but I'm glad that there's people pushing for that to be introduced into the schooling system.
Yeah. At our local public school here in South Grafton, they've just introduced mindfulness for their special ed class, which is 12 kids with special whatever, disabilities usually. But that's a start.
Yeah.
But, it should be the whole lot. Give them all 5 minutes every morning. It doesn't take much. Teach them the skills, teach them how to think, not so much what to think. And you're right, 100 years, probably more, since we started building schoolhouses and put 30 kids in a classroom, teach them all exactly the same thing and give them a test. Well, hello, 150 years ago, maybe. Not now. No way. Teach them to be creative and teach them how to have strong minds and teach them how to be resilient, because that's what mindfulness skills do. They make you resilient. Then, wow, because when you're practicing presence and you're fully present with the lecture or the teacher, then you will retain that knowledge. But if your mind is on someone that's bullying you or something, or you're being abused at home or something else that's going on, you just miss it.
Yeah.
You just totally miss it, So the benefits are there, in sport, like I already discussed, and that goes for all sport too. If you're mindful, that's how our top rugby players can, put a pass on his partner's chest without looking. And they do it often because they've practiced and he knows that he's going to be there, for one thing. But still, they're fully present on the field. They're not thinking, it flows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Going back with...
I get excited sometimes, Andy.
Well, it's amazing what the benefits can be. I mean, it's not just one thing of feeling better about yourself or being able to handle situations better. It's just got so many flowing effects into all aspects of your life. And like the email that I wrote to you said that, for a lot of people that listen to this podcast, it would be very important to learn more about being mindful. But to be honest, I mean, anyone and everyone should be able to learn the benefits and be able to get the benefits of being mindful. And
absolutely.
And going back to what you said about with introducing it into schools and the problems that kids have had over the years with dealing with all sorts of different emotional situations and how to react or how to respond. I keep going back to react. I've got to change my words. But working in juvenile justice, did you find a lot of the young people coming through there were, I guess, the result of a real lack of mindfulness and very much so being in autopilot, being reactive to situations, not having that support system that really, I mean, if they did have that emotional intelligence, potentially they wouldn't have ended up there.
Every chance. Yep. But one thing I did notice in 8 years with juvenile justice, every single kid that came in there, every single boy had past trauma. That was one thing. And abuse, physical abuse in their families, where they come from. They're victims. That's what they are. They're not criminals. And we really should stop treating everyone as criminals, especially anyone on drug charges and stuff. They're not criminals. We should be looking at the underlying reasons that they're addicted, that they've got addictions. Why do they have addictions? Well, yeah, sure, that's one thing. They haven't been taught any mind skills, any mindfulness skills especially. But because quite often they just like getting out of it because they can't stand their normal thought patterns.
Mm.
You know, they're painful. They keep going back to past trauma and back to all sorts of things because it's usually going back that causes depression, and going forward causes anxiety.
Mm.
And when people say if they practice mindfulness, and even kids, and they can be taught, and they already are being taught around the world, because I've got a lot of connections these days from all over the world, especially what's happening in education. And UK Parliament, for example, they're recommending, because they've had mindfulness in the Parliament for 3 years now, and even politicians are seeing the benefits of a mindful practice, and now they're recommending it in police force, in the army, in education, in lots of different areas. Anybody that's at the coal front, actually, SES workers, ambulance workers, police officers, you name it. They can all do with a sound mindful practice. That's for sure. Yeah.
It's I mean, imagine a world full of mindful people. It's
it's not hard to imagine. Wow, what a peaceful place.
Oh, absolutely. I think for some people they might be quite bored because there's nothing entertaining going on. But it's all perspective. It's an incredible thing, and it's I guess when you look at it, it's such a simple concept, but it's so hard for people to grasp the concept and then to practice it as well. And I think going back to what you said before with young people that get involved in crime and get punished, through the system, it's such a Band-Aid fix. And I think for a lot of people, the mentality is that it's easier just to punish people rather than trying to identify why they're doing it in the first place, and then trying to help them and trying to give them different opportunities and trying to improve and strengthen their mindset. But that's too much time and investment for a lot of people. So it's easier just to punish them and then potentially lock them up when they get over a certain age.
Oh, go into politics, Andy, after you finish with the music, if you ever do. Well, but honestly, yeah, you got it.
One thing. This is very relevant. I watched a Vice documentary last night of some young people in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, and they've been targeted as they've got a little gang that they call themselves sort of like the North Side Gang or something, and they're always a target of every time there's a crime that's committed in the area, petty theft and cars being broken into and whatnot. They're always the main targets. And there's a local vigilante group that goes around the area and tries to catch them and names and shames them. And they interviewed the kids in this gang, and every one of them, and this goes straight back to what you said before, every one of them, either their parents broke up when they were kids, that one of them was abusive, their parents were on drugs, they were victims of domestic abuse or sexual harassment or something along those lines as children, and they've all grown up with a chip on their shoulder, and I mean that's a very light way of putting it, but
sure.
lack of a better term, but they've all gone through some form of trauma, and they've experienced life in a lot harder of a way than most people do. And so you look at them and you're listening to them talk, and my instant reaction was, well, yeah, of course it's these guys that are committing all these crimes. I mean, and I can't believe that they're not being locked up. But then when I looked at it further and I was listening to them talk, I thought, well, no wonder they're getting up to no good. I mean, listen to their story and listen to why they're in the position that they're in. And then you think, well, and then they interviewed one lady who's a local community worker, and she's helping a lot of especially young males, try and get some involvement in the community and upskilling them, and then getting them off drugs, and then giving them some sense of purpose and making them feel like they've got an impact in the community. And so she's turning around a lot of young people. But comparing that to the guys that are driving around the area, finding these guys and naming and shaming them, the naming and shaming part's such an easy thing to do. It's so easy to go around and find these people and then call them out and try and get them in trouble. But the lady who's the community worker investing countless hours of sitting down and probably at times feeling like she's banging her head against a brick wall trying to talk some sense into people. She's getting the benefits and far better benefits, but she's obviously having to invest a lot more time in these people. But that's what we have to do. And I guess we're a society we've always been very quick to react. We've got quick solutions, and we're not thinking of the long term.
It's all part of the system, not only the educational system, but the whole, do the crime and get punished, that system. No, there's better ways. There is. And we've got to evolve. That's for sure. Yeah. But you've got a very clear view of it. It's leadership. And I read a Butte thing a few years ago now, how they did a big study into the top organisations in the world, and Google was one of them. And out of the study anyhow came the top 2 traits of good leaders is listening and empathy. Interesting, isn't it?
They're a hard thing to do if we're not mindful. If we're in autopilot and we're moving quickly and not really thinking in the moment, those 2 things are extremely hard to do.
But this is leadership we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Listening and empathy, putting yourself in another's shoes, and listening. Wow, powerful skills, because top companies, and Google many years ago actually got Thich Nhat Hanh, who's probably the #1 mindfulness teacher in the world. He's 91 years old now. He's a monk living in France. And Google got him out, brought him to America to train all their staff. This was like many, many years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know how long ago. And all their staff are mindful. They all have mindful practices. They take breaks. They have gyms for their workers. They keep them fit. And they're switched on. And when you're mindful, it really does, it switches on your creativity, and you being in music, how important that is. But, and where does your songwriting come from, even, out of that silence.
Yep.
You can't sort of force it. You can't think your way into it. It's like problems. You can't think your way out of problems either. You've got to be silent and let the solution come. It'll come, So anyhow, that's what they found in leadership was, and big companies that have trouble in middle management, for example, if they have a turnover of staff, they should really look at training them in mindfulness, because you think to yourself, like, if you've got staff and you're listening to them, and then next time you run into them and says, "Oh, how's your son's broken leg going?" Stuff like that, because you know a little bit about their life, you take a little bit of interest, or even if you just remember someone's name, because mindfulness is very good for that, remembering people's names, because if you be mindful as you meet people and you just pause and you're fully present and you hear their name, you will recall it. It won't be gone 30 seconds later like normal most of us do.
Me included.
Yeah, well, I was like that too one time, but I'm pretty good at it now. But anyhow, that's another story. But you hear what I'm saying? But it's those management styles of, do it my way. Well, no. If you're a listener, show empathy, then staff will work harder and they'll share more with you. They'll be more creative. Productivity will go up, and so on. There you go. Beautiful.
And it goes back to what you said earlier as well. It's connecting.
Yeah, connecting.
So even the example that you used just then of people's names, it happens it doesn't happen very often at all. And I have conversations with people and they'll say their name, and I'm more focused on myself, making sure that my message is being clearly projected to them rather than me taking in whatever they're telling me. So I always forget people's names, and I'm really bad at that. And it's something I'm trying to work on myself. But when you do remember somebody's name, and vice versa, when somebody remembers my name, your eyes light up and it's like, wow, this is incredible. And suddenly that connection of whatever you're trying to build a connection there already, but suddenly it just locks in. And it's amazing what such a simple little tweak can can have. Like, it's just an amazing way to connect with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, my son, he's a golf pro. Well, he's a golf club manager now over in Western Australia.
Mm-hmm.
But through his training to get his PGA ticket, to be a golf pro, and he said to me later on, he said the most valuable thing that he learnt was off me, and that was the skill of remembering people's names. Because when he went to a new pro shop somewhere, or had his own pro shop at a golf club, and he had that skill. When people come in to book in for their game of golf and buy a golf ball or whatever and introduce themselves, he would remember their name. So the next time they walk in, he could say g'day by name. And you know what? No one bought their golf gear anywhere else just because of that. It's powerful.
It's that little extra 1% that can make such a massive difference.
Massive.
What's I mean, you might not want to get too deep into this, but what's one particular way that people can improve on remembering people's names?
By being fully present when you meet them. You can use word association as well, right? That involves thinking. But if you can still your mind, just pause. Use the key thought, be mindful. When you're meeting people, be mindful. Remind yourself to be present, because it's just natural when we're meeting people for our minds to race off because they remind us of something or something, or we're thinking of what to say, or we're thinking of something clever to come up with, whatever. Our minds are busy. So when we actually do hear their name, we don't hear it.
No.
And that's why 30 seconds later, it's gone.
Yep.
And we don't, and this is part of what because I teach people to be mindfulness mentors, and it's a very core mentoring skill as well. And that is to be mindful, have a clear mind, be fully present with the mentee, be fully present and trust that what needs to come into your mind as part of the mentoring process will come when it's meant to. We don't need to be thinking what the next question is, or have our own agenda of how someone should go, or make suggestions. No, that's not what mentoring is about. And it's like remembering names is a similar thing. If we're fully present, so our minds are clear, when you hear their names, you will recall them. Try it, Andy.
Oh, I've got to try. I've definitely got to try. I'm not very good at this, but you're right. Like, and I mentioned this as well. When you have those initial meetings with people and you shake someone's hand and they tell you their name, you are thinking about what you're going to say back. You're thinking about maybe something witty, or depending on the situation, or you're even thinking about what that person thinks of you. And so you're so self-conscious, and that might be a self-esteem thing or whatnot. But you're all these things, and you're diving or jumping between all these different thoughts all at the same time. And you're having a conversation with yourself while this person is telling them their name, and you're shaking their hand. So it sounds so silly when people, and this is probably a big thing, a lot of these things are so simple and they feel very silly when you talk about them, but they're so crucial and important and impactful. And that's maybe why people don't spend a lot of time to really think about it, or give themselves a chance to really take in that information and try and do something about it, because it just doesn't seem like it's important enough it's too simplistic to really spend any time on.
You've got it. You've got such a good handle on it, Andy, that's for sure.
Oh,
yeah, beautiful.
Oh, that's good.
I'm trying. Your listeners are 25 to 40.
Roughly, yeah.
Because, my Facebook page has got 680-odd thousand likers, and they give you the stats on that. And the most popular age group that follows me is 18 to 25, a little bit younger. But isn't that good? I'm quite chuffed with that.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really good that I think it's getting spoken about a lot more, and I think there's more public figures that are starting to talk about the practice a lot more now as well. So I think a lot of those sort of people in their early 20s and becoming adults at 18 as well are probably a little bit more receptive to and open to taking in that practice. And I don't know why I think my demographic's a little bit different. Probably more so because of the type of format that I project this whole thing out on, being a podcast. But a lot of the people that listen also have a similar circle in my music world as well. And a lot of them, I think, have gone through a lot that I've been through over the last few years, where you get to a certain age, and it's usually, mid to late 20s, when you're getting closer to that 30 mark, and you start to think, oh, I've really been mucking around. I haven't really been doing much with my life. I really need to pull my finger out and do something. And then you start to panic and you get anxious, and you're trying to work out what your purpose is and where you fit into your life. And then that's when you start to compare yourself to other people. Like, what's somebody else that I went to school with doing now? Oh, they've got, a wife and kids. They've got a house. Oh, okay. Well, I haven't got that stuff yet. I've got to pull my finger out. And then so it gets worse and worse. And there's just so many different things. You get overwhelmed and confused. And I find with a lot of people in my age group, where I talk to them, are all going through a similar sort of thing. And I don't know whether it's just the type of people that I've always been in circles with, or whether it's just a general thing, especially with guys, where you get to that age and you start to question everything, and you start to, for some people, they relish in it and they really begin to improve and work towards becoming a better person, and other people crumble because it's just so overwhelming and they just don't know where they fit into the world. And it's almost like a repeat of being in your teens, when you're sort of at that stage of about 14, 15, 16, where you're very vulnerable and very sort of open and easily influenced by so many different things, and you wonder where you fit into the world. And it's almost like it gets repeated again about a decade later, where you're getting to that next milestone where you really wonder, well, where do we fit into the grand scheme of things?
Exactly, and it's all a bit natural. But I think that demographic you're talking about there's a lot of relationship failure too.
Yeah.
And if we're taught those skills early on, wow, mindfulness skills, because that has a big impact on relationship skills as well. The whole thing of being fully present, for example. Wow. It's the greatest gift you can give your loved ones. Be fully present with them. Have time for them. It's not rocket science. And once we start to think also where relationship problems do go wrong, because we start to focus on ourselves, and that's really not where the focus should be. It should be on the other one. If you make them the most important thing, especially where partners go, you make them the most important thing in your life, and it's not about you, because we judge, and things happen, sometimes little things too, and it can fester in our minds, and we say, oh, I'm not happy about that. Blah, 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 away it goes, and their minds just explode, and it turns into a big, all of a sudden people are out of love, Whereas one time they were very much in love when they were focused on the other.
It's so easy to fall into that trap if going back to the key word, not being mindful. And I think a lot of the time people can probably be sort of existing for a decade without being mindful whatsoever, and then wonder where their life's been for the past 10 years. And you get into autopilot, and even when you said earlier on about younger people that have been through a lot of hardship, the past is depression, and the future's anxiety, and it's easier to fall back into the depression because there's a bit of a comfort zone there. And for a lot of people, autopilot is such a comfort zone because it's just, they don't have to think, they don't have to put anything, there's no responsibility put back on themselves, and there's no time invested. It's easy just to sort of float through until you hit a brick wall, or until something substantial happens, and then you don't have the tools to be able to handle it.
That's it, and that's what they are, tools, definitely. Yep. Make us more resilient.
I'm constantly, every day, trying to be more and more resilient, and it's quite interesting when you start to think about the practice more and more, that initially it's quite scary, because you you realize, oh, geez, like my life. So I've been all over the shop for so many years. I've got so many areas here that need improvement, and I'm not doing very well in all these things, and I don't handle these situations very well. Oh, I can actually see now all these mistakes that I've made and whatnot. But then after a while, you start to get quite excited about it, because you're giving yourself the opportunity to make things better and become better, and you, when the situations pop up the next time, you start to handle them just that little bit better than you did previously. And I think I'm sure you would probably agree, it's you're always forever learning and trying to master being mindful. I think there'll always be times where it's a bit of an up and down situation, but you always sort of incrementally get better over time.
Absolutely. Especially when you come to a point where you realise that life is just full of lessons, and everything that's happened to you, is how we used to think, will actually happen for you, not to you. It happened for you. Once you start looking at your life like that, lessons learned, like even my 15 dark years, because that's what I call them now, and they're years that, well, I wasn't always unwell, but I was quite a bit of the time. But my 15 dark years are valuable to me now, because it's helped make me who I am. You know? And yeah, it happens for us, not to us. It's all these simple little key thoughts, you know.
It's trying not to be a victim as such. So things are happening to you, but yeah, things are happening for you. It's a lot of it's a play on words, isn't it? Like just
play on words.
fixing your vocabulary. I can't even spit that out today. But just changing those choice of words can make a big impact as well.
And it's even like turning 30 years old, and then you think, well, whoa, what have I've been doing with my life for the last 10 years, you know? And then you start to think of this and this and this and this. Then you start to think of all the things you need to do, this and this and this and this and this. But really, we shouldn't be overthinking at all. And we should be focusing on one thing, just one thing. It's not easy either, but when you think about it, we can only do one thing at a time, and we can only ever be in the present moment. That's all we ever have, is this moment right now. Nothing more. Yeah. And focus on one thing. And if you're wondering what the next thing is, silence your mind. It'll come. The next step will come. You know, first thing in the morning is a good time to do it.
It's a bit of mental space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you get out of bed, just stay there for 5 minutes, you know. Don't set your alarm. You don't really need one, do you? But if you do, we'll set it a little bit earlier, you know, and spend 5 minutes with yourself. And a good way to start doing that is just by listening. Because it's quiet early in the morning. Yep. Just listen for the birds singing or whatever. Just listen and be present, fully present where you are, in your bedroom or whatever. Just listen. And it's amazing what does pop into your mind, you know, and quite often it's the thing you need to do that day. You know, the next step comes to you. You don't have to think it. You don't have to work it out.
I know what I'll be doing tomorrow morning now when I wake up. Well, I'm keeping an eye on the time, so I'll wrap it up now. Okay. But I definitely would love to have another chat with you sometime down the track, especially when you're getting further into this this mentor program. I'd love to know how you go after the first 12 months with the soon-to-be mentors. I'd be interested to see some results of that and some of your thoughts as to how it all went. But in the meantime, what's the best way for people to shoot you a message and say hello?
They can do it through Facebook, through Mindfulness Coach Facebook page, or email. My email is there on my website and on my Facebook page. Yep.
Great.
Yep, that's it. Fantastic. Google Mindfulness Coach, because you'll find me. My Facebook page, my web page, it's all there straight up on the front page. Not because I pay them either. It's just from traffic.
Well, I tell you what, I must applaud you, because you're doing really good things when it comes to social media and being present on the internet. I think a lot of people could take some lessons from you, because you've certainly done some great things. You seem to be everywhere, and as you said, you've got the traffic there, and that's why you're showing up in those search results. But when I did a little bit of background research, and I was going through your website and looking at the Facebook page and everything, I thought, oh wow, like you've been busy.
And I think there's 51 mentors now all around Australia on mindfullymad.org, because that was the next step that came to me a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about the keys for mindfulness mentoring, because I realised that that's really what we need, is mentors, to be able to teach kids in schools and all the rest of it, help people that are having got addiction or relationship problems, or they've got mental illness. You know, mentors is the way to go. And I woke up in the middle of the night, actually, with an acronym, PACE. And PACE is presence, awareness, connection, and empathy. And when we mentor, they're the 4 things that we operate out of. Yeah. I
like it. I really do.
So we pace ourselves. So you can use that as a key for as well, because that's what I teach my mentors. Use pace as a key word. Pace yourself. And remember those skills: presence, awareness, connection, and empathy. Good on you, Andy.
Oh, love it. I love it. Now I'm going to be sitting down. I'm going to take 5 minutes after I finish speaking to you and just take all that in. That was really good. But
I thought you were recording it. There you go.
No, I am. But
you are. Oh,
yeah.
Good. Yeah, right.
But no, I think I'll just have to reflect on all that, because there's a lot of good things, and yeah, I do have a bit of a grasp on it, and I've spent the last couple of years reading up a little bit about it, and I try to practice a bit here and there. But as you said, it's always lesson after lesson, and you try to get better. And there's a lot of things that I certainly can be better at, and there's lots of little tweaks that you can always do. So I'm looking forward to reflecting a bit on this conversation and seeing what I can do, starting with an extra 5 minutes in the morning.
Well, you'll get my book in about a week, or I don't know how long it takes. It takes about a week, snail mail these days, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and it's only 12,000 words. It's pretty easy to read.
Fantastic. I look forward to reading it.
So that a lot of the things we talked about today, it's in there. So it'll all come back to you again.
Oh, great. Well, I'll also get people to go to your website, and then they can find all that information on there as well about everything you're involved with, and as well as the book Mindful Actions, and hopefully they'll immerse themselves in this practice and be able to speak to you a bit further about it.
Good on you, Andy. Excellent.
Okay.
You'll be making a big difference in your world too.
I hope so.
You might notice on the front cover of my book is the ripple effect.
Yep.
And I'm causing my ripple, and my hope is that the mentors and the people that I touch, they cause their ripples. And mate, we can change the world one person at a time. We can. Government can't do it. Religion can't do it, but we can.
I love it. I've started my ripple now.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right. Well, thanks, John, and happy birthday.
Thanks, Andy. See you, mate.
All the best. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that chat with John. If you want to learn more about being mindful or the practice of mindfulness, I would highly encourage you to check out John's website, which is mindfulnesscoach.com.au. Or you can search for Mindfulness Coach on Facebook, or as John said, you can search for him on Google. He'll show up in the top search results. John has been very busy over the last few years and has some great internet presence and quite an audience. So he's doing amazing things and continues to do so. So you can check out those resources. Also, I will have all of the details of our conversation over at andysocial.net in the show notes there as well as all previous episodes of the Andy Social podcast. So make sure you go over there, and I'll have contact info for John as well if you want to reach out and say hello. Now, I'll try and wrap this up really quickly. A bit of housekeeping. If you enjoyed this episode in particular, or enjoy the Andy Social podcast, I would love it if you could leave a rating and review over on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you've got. If they've got some form of comments or likes or whatever it might be. It helps this podcast reach more and more people. I also put these episodes up on YouTube as well, because YouTube, at least in my opinion, tends to be more familiar with more people, at least here in Australia anyway. And it's a great way to introduce people to particular episodes, or even just to the podcast platform in general. So if you know somebody, when we're talking about this episode in particular, that could really benefit from learning more about being mindful and may enjoy this conversation that I had with John, I would encourage you to use the YouTube links to share amongst your friends and family. It's a great way to spread the word, and hopefully it will have a positive impact on more people. Apart from that, just listen each and every week, and it goes a long way. And the more people that listen to this podcast, the more amazing guests I can have on, such as John, and we'll continue to grow and learn each and every week. Sounds so silly, but it's true. So that's it. I'm wrapping it up. Enough rambling. Until next week, take care. We'll speak soon. Ta-ta.